What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have yet another album review for you. So this year is winding down, but I think there's still some other releases out there. And since the other guys also got that fucking cold that I had, I didn't do it. I'm pretty sure it was Shredlord that was patient zero on that one. But yeah, we're all kind of laid up, but we're all getting better. But since they're sick, I'm just taking things solo for a little bit here, at least in terms of reviews. And again, there was still some stuff I wanted to cover, and this one I definitely wanted to cover because I reviewed an album by this band last year, and I was very curious to see where they went from that last one, because that last one was really strange but really awesome. So today I'm going to go over the latest offering from Veilburner, which I think this is their self-titled album. It's VLBRNR, so just Veilburner abbreviated. We'll call it their self-titled. This also comes out on the 2nd of December on Transcending Obscurity Records. This band formed in 2014 in Pennsylvania. Now this is their 6th album overall. I reviewed their last one, Lurkers in the Capsule of Skull, which is just a creepy title for a creepy album. And I was really just kind of blown away by how creepy and dissonant and odd it was, but also catchy. And that is kind of them in a nutshell. This is described as dissonant, blackened death metal. There's all sorts of just crazy elements going into it, and honestly, this is a lot different than the last one, but a lot different in a really good way. Now, when I reviewed their first one, the band actually got a hold of me and thanked me for doing it, and they said that I hit, you know, kind of the nail in the head on one particular thing. They like to do dissonance, but also have hooks in that dissonance. It isn't just supposed to be noise. And honestly, there's a lot of bands out there that just sort of lay on dissonance instead of actually writing, like, you know, big hooks or like a riff that repeats that actually, you know, makes you get into it more than just like kind of getting lost in the atmosphere. And I think that sort of ethos, that sort of idea has carried on even more on this album, because this is, it's just as crazy and as wild in terms of like the dissonance, the song structure, and just how outlandishly over the top it can be, but it also has labored the point of hooks. And I will be honest, this is way catchier than I thought it would be. When I was getting ready to listen to this one, I was like, all right, the last one was just fucking nuts. Kind of wonder what this one's gonna be like. I have a feeling, you know, because the last one was just absolutely batshit crazy. Blast beats, dissonant crawling riffs everywhere, extra synths and weird atmosphere, and the vocals on here and on the last one are absolutely insane. The dude growls, screams, groans. There's even spoken word and mutters in the background. It's like listening to Satan do a TED Talk with Hate Eternal backing him up. I'm not entirely sure what they're talking about, but I mean, honestly, it can't be good. But this album, I think, explores more songwriting dynamics and legit hooks that are very memorable and, dare I say, again, catchy as fucking hell. The opening track, Vulgar Incantations, or 6 Vulgar Incantations, they put the Roman numeral 6 up there, and it is kind of clever how they put, you know, VI and then it starts with VI. I don't know, I look for weird shit like that. But immediately you get this sort of like industrial drone, and then the song starts picking up intensity, and it gets into what you come to expect from them if you've been a fan of them for a while. Again, the dissonant riffs, blast beats, again, those creepy vocals, but all of a sudden it starts like shifting a little bit more. And before, it kind of just laid on that atmosphere and laid on these dissonant riffs. Again, they were catchy, but this one actually employs like some legit death metal riffs that aren't necessarily dissonant and not really atonal or anything like that, but they're just solid death metal riffs. Now, even with those more like straightforward moments on here, this was just sort of a teaser for what was to come on this album in terms of just them broadening their sound. When you get down to songs like Repulsed by the Light and Burning the Veil, all of a sudden they really start exploring melody, and not just like, you know, like dissonant atonal melodies, like legit hooks. There's stuff on here that I would even compare to Gojira or Tool to some extent, but mix that with, you know, like Behemoth or Blut aus Nord. The cool thing with these more accessible sections, and accessible is not a dirty word here if you're actually, you know, writing some really creative stuff here, is that they retain their brutality. Like, the riffs are still really heavy. The vocals never leave that fucking dark, satanic fucking spot that they pretty much hover in. And the drums are constantly pummeling, but the fact that there are melodies on here and they repeat a lot really makes this an easier listen. Like the first one I really enjoyed, but I think here it is taken to a much larger, measure. Like they're trying to explore the melodies a little bit more. They're adding to them as they go on. There's really cool guitar harmonies, and I think the guitar work on here is even more creative than what they did before. Like there was a lot of really cool like dissonant stuff, but this one actually employs, again, like really cool lead melodies. They do some more harmonies. There's really cool effects and filters. Like there are spots in here where it sounds like he's playing a sitar, or they just add like an extra bit of twang to the guitar too. And the layers of synths on here are really interesting just because they do a lot of different stuff. Interim Oblivion opens up with almost like sort of a trip hop like pattern. Like it almost sounds like something you would hear on a Crystal Method album. While Burning the Veil actually kind of sounds like Tangerine Dream to start. Like it's those droning spacey synths, but you also have moments where they're just sort of like background noises and little bleeps and sweeps, and we make that joke a lot, but it is kind of true. There's also like scathing noise samples in there, and with the vocals adding so much atmosphere as well, it becomes this very caustic layer of sound, but it can switch gears and get very, pleasant to the ear, which again, that wasn't something I was like super prepared to say about this, because as much as I liked the last one, it was definitely just a caustic, raw, visceral listen. This still has that, but the fact that it explores a lot more melody and just different songwriting dynamics really caught me off guard. Interim Oblivion, again, has a very interesting start. It builds up and gets like slow and sludgy. There's just dirty riffs on there. They throw in some really cool Middle Eastern-ish guitar melodies on there, and then it takes this interesting little dropout and it has a jazzy breakdown to it. All of a sudden the guitars are more clean, and clean guitars are a bigger thing on here, and it turns into this really wild transition. And again, this is something that really wasn't explored in the last one. It's almost progressive just in terms of how it's structured and the fact that they're including so many different elements. Like this almost sounds like a collaboration between Immolation and Mastodon, which now that I say that out loud, I'm kind of curious what that would sound like. The song Unorthodoxygen, which that is a fantastic play on words there. That song, it opens up almost more akin to like Primus or Mr. Bungle. Like the guitars are twangy. It sounds like it belongs in a fucking Primus song. Like it's just very odd. Not the bass line so much. The bass line is really good, and the bass lines do stand out on here, but I mean, it's not, less. Few things are less. But the fact that it's just kind of funky, there's a weird off-time rhythm to it, but the fact that it's so strange and it takes time to build into what they usually do, I really like that. And it even kind of goes off the reservation a little bit more. Like there's some more thrash metal riffs on here, and you actually get like that twisted up with their weird blackened death metal later. But I don't know, I like this more adventurous sound. These songs are bigger in scope overall, I would say. The songs, much like the album in its entirety, takes its time building, and it's really cool to hear it slowly unveil itself. I had to make one joke there. But most importantly, it doesn't completely abandon the listener in terms of like what they expected. Like when it needs to, it absolutely brings the fucking hammer down in terms of just flat out brutality. Inveximus Hex and None So Hideous pretty much just lay on blast beats. The riffs are far more aggressive. The vocals sound even more unhinged, which, I mean, honestly, the vocals are pretty unhinged on all of this. Like, it's a legit, creepy, unsettling vocal performance done with lots of different filters, and occasionally vocals that sound like they're coming at you from different points in the room, which is very unsettling, especially when you're alone in your house. And on the more black metal centric side, you have Low Heirs to the Serpent, which has more cold black metal riffing, but they mix that up with like almost technical death metal, like kind of along the lines of like bands like Necrophagist, just in terms of like really cool crawling riffs and such, but also that cold atmosphere. And industrial elements are sort of pockmarked all over this album. It's mostly just for atmosphere, but occasionally you hear them come to the forefront, like this breakdown on Low Heirs to the Serpent. It's this, sort of industrial little punch of the drum and this palm muted riff. I don't know, it sounds more like something you would hear in like, Pitch Shifter, Godflesh, something like that. But then that descends into just Morbid Angel, sort of just fierce, ugly, dark sounding tremolo riffs, and a big flip to death metal vocals, which again, I like these vocal flips on here. It keeps you on your toes. Especially in the song Repulsed by the Light, I really like the vocal tension that's there. Like it switches from growls to this very desperate but very powerful spoken word performance on here, and I kind of like that the vocals have their own meter. Like, they're not necessarily just following the rhythm all the time. Like, sometimes they just go off the script and kind of rant a little bit. And that kind of adds to the overall crazy vibe of this album. And while I'm not sure if the drums are real or programmed, I like the fact that this has a lot of groove to it. Generally, when you get down to like more dissonant atonal bands, you know, namely like bands like Deathspell Omega, again, Blue Das Nord, sometimes the drum work can get as crazy as the riffing. And it's easy to kind of lose your place in a song. These songs really lay on grooves and, you know, particular breakdowns, blast beats. They don't go like, you know, kind of off the reservation and do like too much jazzy noodling. And when they do, it's more or less saved for like a bridge or a really interesting transition. I also think that the mix on here sounds a little bit cleaner versus the last one. Now that has both like good and bad stuff. It kind of just depends on your preference. I like the cleaner production on this one, actually. It kind of lets the guitar work really stand out more, and you can hear every distinct layer very well on this one. Like, you know, nothing really gets kind of lost to the din of dissonance and droning atmosphere as much. But again, if you're a fan of more raw material, this might be lacking in rawness overall just because it is a little bit more polished. But honestly, I think, you know, the overall effect of the album in terms of it being this very catchy but also very just twisted dark listen should really bring you in, because I think this band has like the same appeal as a band like Portal. But while Portal essentially pisses in the face of contemporary song structure and you actually ever feeling good about anything ever again or getting a decent night's sleep, like seriously, Hagbalbia was really fucked up. But anyway, this band embraces hooks still while employing, you know, all the dissonance and the chaos. So I think this is definitely more digestible than say Portal is, namely because there are actual hooks in here that do repeat, and it isn't just, you know, a blunderbuss of noise. Now, there are some small issues I do have with this, namely the fact that the ambience can get just downright noisy at times, and there's a difference between like ambience and noise. Ambience, in my opinion, adds to the music. It adds another layer of atmosphere, can kind of like, you know, make the mood change. Noise can just be grating, and there are moments on here where the background noise kind of just sort of swells up too much and kind of takes me out of the song. Like namely on Interim, Oblivion, and Burning the Veil, there is just this background hum that keeps coming up, and it just kind of gets grating. It eventually subsides, but the fact that it was there in the first place and kind of just made me go, what the hell's wrong with my speakers? Oh no, it's the album. Yeah, I didn't dig that. And honestly, there were moments on here with the more melodic guitar work and, you know, more hooky, just epic spots where I think the vocals could have actually matched it. I'm not saying like do a full-on like big clean chorus or something like that with like, you know, giant fucking like radio rock hooks or anything like that, but maybe something a little bit more melodic, like a scream that's more in key, or, you know, something to that effect, because I think that makes that moment even more powerful. And I will say, I like the end of this album, but I think the whole middle section is like the strongest section. But the last song, Ruin, I thought was not quite as good as the rest of the album. Like, it's a more slow, brooding song. There's definitely more of like an industrial element to it. And I think if it actually had stayed that course throughout the entire thing, I probably would have liked it more, but they kind of like shoehorn in a more extreme metal bridge on it. And while I like brutality, while I like blast beats and all that shit, this song kind of felt like it should have just been like the slow brooding closer, like add a layer of doom metal to it. But overall, I still enjoyed the song, and honestly, I fucking enjoyed this entire album, and it was a legit fucking surprise. So overall, I'm gonna give this 4 stars. This is fucking awesome. Again, I'm sort of taken back to my conversation with one of the members, and we were talking about melody and dissonance and how those can work better together, and how they wanted to have all that dissonant atmosphere but still have hooks, and they have fucking done it on here. This is a flat out catchy album that I wasn't expecting to be very catchy. It still supplies all that caustic blackened death metal and twisted dark atmosphere, but the fact that there are just great hooks on here really makes this stand out. I feel like there was way more put into the whole songwriting process in terms of exploring different dynamics on here. This album takes some really cool chances, and I think that pays off for the most part. While I wasn't a fan of some of the noisier aspects in terms of all the extra ambience, Most of it is really solid and adds a lot to the music, and it doesn't take away from the incredible songwriting that's on here. Vocally, this is a fucking twisted, dark album. It is unsettling at every corner. I would have liked maybe like a little bit of melody with some of the more melodic parts, but honestly, the entire performance I thought was really fucking good. A lot of this reminded me of a band like An Alnathrak, which can be shockingly catchy at times too. And don't think that this is them fucking selling out or anything like that. Like, this is a softer fucking blackened death metal album, if that actually fucking exists. This is still brutal as hell and will beat the living shit out of you in terms of just how heavy it is. And of course the atmosphere is dark and dreary as hell. But honestly, I think this will actually stay with listeners more because it has hooks to come back to, and I think that is very important. So congratulations, guys. You found that great balance between just being dissonant and creepy and just fucking dark as hell and actually writing clever hooks. So yeah, if any of that sounds really good to you and you like bands like An Alnathrak, Blue Dust Nord, Hate Eternal, Immolation, and even stuff like Mastodon, I think it's all here and you definitely should check this one out. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there, as well as our store if you'd like to get one of our shirts. And patrons, we have another poll going up this time for Shredlord's selections. We need some votes on there. He's got 4 really fucking good ones, and we need to decide which one is going to be the next one that he helms for a ranking. Also, Denver Death Fest, taking place in Denver, April 20th through the 22nd. We will be announcing the bands towards the end of the year. I'm pretty excited about it. I don't even necessarily know who's all on it, so this will be a reveal for me too. So stay tuned for that. And of course, thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that shit. It is absolutely amazing to see this channel grow well beyond any of our expectations. It's just amazing. I know I think of like different shit to say at the end of the video, and it always kind of comes back to that, but I mean it. It's absolutely fucking awesome, and looking forward to doing some year-end lists and a whole bunch of other shit in the future. So once again, thank you all so much for watching, and we will catch you later.